Good morning on this Sunday, December 12th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Former Senator David Perdue is all in for governor, setting up quite a showdown in the Republican primary against current Governor Brian Kemp, Vernon Jones, and Candace Taylor. Also, the opponents of Buckhead City may be late to the game, but they're showing up in force to defeat the movement. And GOP leaders want to do away with the state income tax, but will that hurt public schools, healthcare, and public safety? Melita, Phil, and Martha are here. Bobby Capel is back filling in for Theron. Welcome.
Great to be here in person.
Yes, it is. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Former Senator David Perdue says he's the only Republican who can beat Stacey Abrams in November, so he's throwing his hat in the race for governor.
If our governor was ever going to fight for us, wouldn't he have done it already?
Former U.S. Senator David Perdue says, though, this isn't personal. He says he just feels as though his fellow Republican, Governor Brian Kemp, can't beat Stacey Abrams in the general election. Perdue also blames Kemp for his own failed 2020 re-election bid.
Unfortunately, today, we are divided, and Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger are to blame. Look, I like Brian. This isn't personal. It's simple. He has failed all of us and cannot win in November. Instead of protecting our elections, he caved to Abrams and cost us 2 Senate seats.
Governor Kemp's campaign spokesman fired back, saying Governor Kemp has a proven track record of fighting the radical left to put hardworking Georgians first, while Perdue is best known for ducking debates, padding his stock portfolio during a pandemic, and losing winnable races. Well, if you think this is nasty, just wait. Phil? Welcome back. We missed you last week. Lots to talk about.
Thank you.
Former Senator Perdue is blaming Governor Kemp for his loss, but many say it was President Trump who divided the party and had people stay home.
Well, you're going to have this back and forth debate all until the end of the May primary, and then it's on to the general election. So let the games begin is what I say. I think what's going to be debated, yes, is probably election fraud and what happened in 2020. But I think what's going to happen politically is you want to have kitchen table issues that both Governor Kemp and the other candidates are going to be talking about for the gubernatorial race, as well as for all the other statewide races. So I think you're going to see issues like critical race theory. You're going to see issues like income tax. I know we're going to be talking about all of that, and education and all of that. So I think this is not unusual at all.
Well, you know, former Senator Perdue said this is not personal, and then he went on to say, but Brian Kemp has failed us. So I think it is personal on a lot of fronts. Melita, was this a gift to Democrats?
It is a gift to Democrats, and while the Republicans rip each other to shreds, Stacey Abrams can stand above the fray and talk about the kitchen table issues Phil just mentioned. You know, per capita income in Georgia rose in the 20 years prior to the Republican trifecta taking control. And under Republican administrations, it has dropped precipitously. And that gives Stacey Abrams an opportunity to talk about things like per capita income and hospital closures and Medicaid expansion, the things that matter to the pocketbooks of real Georgians.
Martha, some Republicans are lining up in support of Governor Kemp, but others are just sitting it out. I'm curious your thoughts on the line that former Senator Perdue keeps using, which is that he believes that Governor Kemp cannot beat Stacey Abrams in November, but Governor Kemp already defeated her once.
Well, I mean, I thought, as I said last week, I thought that David Perdue was in. And in full disclosure, I worked for both of these men, okay? And so I know them very well. I do think that there's a couple of things that were rough in the rollout. And I think that even Senator Perdue has said that it sort of got pushed up because of Stacey Abrams' announcement. And one of them is this statement about caving, Brian Kemp caving. And when I talked to the communications folks about it, I said, just clarify that, because he really wasn't involved in that decision. It was a decision between Raffensperger and the Georgia Democratic Party. And so, but they think that he could have done more. So that was the challenge that I said last week. The challenge for both Stacey Abrams and for David Perdue is that they've got to make a case as to why, with low unemployment, lots of jobs out there, economic booming, all of that, how they're going to do it better. And when you're on the reason why it's so hard to beat incumbents is because you got to talk about how bad things are instead of the good, positive things that are said. That's why it's difficult to beat incumbents.
So you've worked for both. Are you taking a side?
I'm not taking a side. No, I'm not. I want to get both of of them on the show, and they are we're both on last week and we'll be both on next week. But I am going to be very honest about where I think the faults are, and I think that it is very true that Governor Kemp is the only person who has ever beaten Stacey Abrams, and so there's a lot of people that are going to line up behind him for that. There's also some letter that was out there from the state Senate. It hasn't been revealed yet, but from the state Senate to David Perdue, asking him not to run. There's legislators that are out there talking about things, and so there's going to be pressure put to bear. And I agree with Phil. Let the games begin. I believe in the primary system, but if you're going to be a part of the primary system, then when you get through it, you got to unite and support who wins.
Let the games begin. I think it's more like the war, right? Bobby, would Stacey Abrams rather face former Senator Perdue or Governor Kemp?
She's facing exactly what she wants right now, which is the two of them going at each other. This is the absolute best case scenario for Stacey Abrams and for Democrats up and down the ballot, statewide attorney general candidates, down to Secretary of State. This is going to, if Republicans after this are as fractured as they were after the runoffs in January, bring it, because that is great news for the Democratic Party. Now, just on a side note, he said, David Perdue was quoted this week as saying, and I want to get this right, the last thing I wanted to do was run a campaign. Now, he's going to wish after he ran this campaign that he didn't, because I predict this will become the most embarrassing campaign in recent political history in the country, because he's running on a total platform of nothing except for a lie about Donald Trump. It's ridiculous.
Well, and he's never liked campaigning. He's never liked mixing with the regular people. He prefers those small, closed-door, big donor types of receptions, or a big rally where he bounds onto the stage, bounds off, and doesn't have to shake hands.
Look,
It sounds like you both are afraid of David Perdue with all this
Oh, no.
passion.
Ask John Ossoff if he's afraid of David Perdue.
Democrats know that jean jacket is just brought out for campaigns.
Phil, wait. I want to ask Phil this, because you can respond to them, but you had some really interesting Insider Advantage Fox 5 polling this week. And we have to remember, we're here in our Metro Atlanta bubble. But let's be honest, the Republican primaries are fought and won in rural Georgia.
Well, that's correct, and I would have to say that Matt Towery of my company Insider Advantage did a poll on December 6th just for the GOP primary voters. And it was interesting. The first question was, who would you vote for governor in a GOP primary, Kemp or Perdue? And basically Kemp had a 19-point lead. The second question was the big one, and what if you knew that Trump endorsed a candidate like David Perdue? And then the 19-point advantage was erased that Kemp had. So to your point, yes, it's Trump country outside the 29 counties of Metro Atlanta. And I would say, and this is why my liberal colleagues are upset, because the Biden administration has run this country into the ditch, and the Democrats are just parroting Biden talking points right now, including Stacey Abrams. And so, yeah, we're going to have a tough, divisive primary, but we're going to be ready, because I know one thing, the base can be unified after May, along with our independents that are coming to the Republicans. Why? Because of the radicalism of the Democrats.
Melita, and then Martha.
The economic numbers for this country have greatly improved under the Biden administration. The press hasn't caught up to all of that, but all Democrats can be proud of some of the accomplishments of the Biden administration economically.
Look, as of taping, inflation is almost 7%. People are paying 3 times as much for gasoline as they were. Maybe the press hasn't caught up, but the average person at the kitchen table hasn't caught up either. It's much harder for them today than it was a year ago. Now, I will say from a financial standpoint, but what I will say, the fact of the matter is 450,000 Republicans did not turn out in the runoff, and only 150,000 Democrats. Democrats are kind of at their high water mark unless they can win people over again. What we saw in Virginia was overwhelmingly parents with children and independents going for Republicans. Our ideas are better, but we got to communicate them, and that's the key.
All right, I got to wrap it there, everybody. Thank you. That was a great debate. Coming up, opponents of Buckhead City admit they're a little late to the game, but they're ready for battle.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
The cavalry has arrived. That's what supporters of a United Atlanta said at their high-dollar fundraiser this week. Among those high-profile opponents of Buckhead City, former U.S. Senator Wyche Fowler, Arthur Blank, Hawk CEO Steve Koonin, and UPS CEO Carol Tomei. Melita, some big names are fighting Buckhead City, but even they admit they got off to a slow start. So what should be the strategy here?
The strategy needs to be honing in on what Buckhead City would do to bond ratings, not just for the city of Atlanta, but for the entire state and every entity within the state. And once voters, and even some of those who now think they believe in a Buckhead City, understand that the 3A bond rating the state has enjoyed for decades would be at jeopardy with this proposal, they might switch sides.
Martha, you know, this is now an issue in the governor's race. We saw former Senator Perdue come out in favor of Buckhead City, and Brian Kemp hasn't weighed in. He stayed kind of neutral on this. How big of a part will this play?
I'm not surprised that the governor stayed neutral, because he is kind of hands-off when it comes to the legislature. He lets these things kind of percolate up through the legislature. But I just think this issue is not going to stay throughout the election. I really don't. I think that we're going to see some work in the legislative session that's going to bring this to fruition and kind of solve this problem. And I tend to think that while I think that people should be their own city if they want to, but they still, in this case, I don't think it's going to work out.
Well, Atlanta Mayor-elect Andre Dickens and the incoming City Council President Doug Shipman were at the fundraiser. Phil, do supporters of the Buckhead City movement have faith that Andre Dickens can turn things around? I mean, can he convince them a Buckhead City isn't needed?
Well, I think that when Andre Dickens was campaigning, and by the way, congratulations, he did win, but I also want to congratulate Felicia Moore, because that's a person that fought for honesty and transparency through two different mayors. But to answer your question, I think there's a lot of momentum for Buckhead cityhood. Why Andre Dickens barely mentioned North Atlanta and Buckhead. He was trying to concentrate on South Atlanta, and you got to be a mayor for the whole city. That gained momentum, I think, for the Buckhead cityhood movement. And you're going to see, I think it's going to be dealt with in the first 30 days of the 2022 General Assembly. I think that, I've always been in favor of the people's right to vote on any cityhood proposal. Let's get the pros, let's get the cons out. We could talk about bond issues, or we can talk about the schools. By the way, in the legislation, the Atlanta public school system, those would be APS schools for 4 years. There's a lot of talk that, oh, you wouldn't have control of the school system. So you're going to hear this back and forth. I think the momentum is there for Buckhead cityhood. Now, yes, in politics, anything can happen, though.
Yes, it can. This week, the mayor-elect was out and about, Bobby, talking about his vision. We did mention Doug Shipman was your client, so congratulations.
Yes.
How does Andre Dickens, the mayor-elect, how does he unite Atlanta?
Well, I think he's already started doing it. You know, he has actually reached out to lots of folks on the north side, despite what Phil would have you know, and in Buckhead, and he understands the issue.
After the election.
Well, that's what happens. If you're a mayor, you get elected, you got to be the mayor for everybody, whether they voted for you or not. At least that's what you're supposed to do, not Donald Trump, okay? So you have an opportunity here in front of yourself. You've got a new leadership. There are several issues. Melita brought up an important one with the bond rating, but it's the education, the public safety. We talk about public safety. You specifically talk about public safety on this show all the time, and I think it's important. I agree. Give him, the new leader of Atlanta, a chance to keep this city together and to fix some of the problems that he's campaigned on and has been elected to. And what I would agree with Theron was a bit of a landslide.
Well, that's a fair point, but he's got to say that I'm for due process for police officers involved in any shooting case. If he can say that, then maybe that'll help.
Well, Martha, we know that Mayor-elect Andre Dickens has been meeting with Governor Kemp. Do you think at some point, because of the governor's race now, that the governor will take a side and be in favor of Buckhead City?
You know, I don't know, but I do hope that these meetings are fruitful, because I think it's really important for the governor of Georgia to have a good relationship with the mayor of Atlanta. You know, Atlanta and what Atlanta touches is about half the state, and it's important that they work on that together.
Melita, besides crime, what do you see as a priority for the mayor-elect?
Well, I think uniting the city and tamping down the Buckhead City movement. And he has such a wide mandate because of the margin. It's the largest margin in many years. And I think he also has a wonderful role model in Shirley Franklin. She was our last great mayor, and she will teach him a great deal about governing if he listens.
Bobby, you have your hand
Yeah,
up. It's much easier to get my attention when
right?
y'all are in studio.
Zooms and muting myself like a moron. Yeah. No, I was just going to say he also, if anybody up here has actually spent some time with him in a room, he's a very personable guy, and he has the ability personally to reach across what could be divisive lines and bring people in, and I expect him to do that as mayor.
Well, he's hit the ground running with a great deal of charisma and energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
he
fine, but he's got to
seems
get a
genuine.
new police chief right away. He was hesitant about that. We've talked about that on the gang. Let's get a new police chief. I want to hear more. He's talked, I saw the TV ad, we're going to get 400 more law enforcement officers. No, you're not going to get that until you start giving bonuses, when you start giving maybe the cadets to the academy, maybe free rent. You've got to have some incentives to do that, and you've got to show up at roll calls, and you've got to show that you're concerned about rising crime. We're rivaling Chicago with our murders.
Well, he's just been elected, so we'll give him time, and then we'll critique.
You're very
I
optimistic.
still love that he's a chemical engineer. I mean, that is like the top of the top. He's a super intelligent thing. I don't know him very well at all. I hope I'll get to know him, but I love that he's a chemical engineer.
Oh, you went to Georgia Tech?
Even though he went to Georgia Tech. Even though he went to Georgia
I
Tech.
come from a family of engineers, so I get it.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I
love
do. They're
engineers.
problem solvers, for sure. I didn't get those genes, by the way. Coming up, some Republican leaders are pushing for an end to the state income tax. So how does the state make up $14 billion in revenue? We'll discuss next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Former Senator David Perdue and other Republican leaders say a priority for them is to get rid of the state income tax. Martha, we know our neighbors in Tennessee and Florida don't have a state income tax, but they also have major tourist attractions. So can this be done without hurting health care, public safety?
Well, I don't think it's going to be something
Education.
that's education, and I'm on the State Board of Education in full disclosure. I don't think it can be done all at one time, and I think that was the proposal that was on the table kind of before the pandemic, that it would kind of ease it down. But I do think it's a proposal worth looking at. I mean, what they do, though, in Florida, it's not just tourist attractions. That's a kind of a red herring that people are throwing out there. It's higher property taxes and it's higher sales taxes, which everybody pays. And so, it is going to be a debate we're going to have. I've been a longtime supporter of the fair tax, and there is a bill that has been in the legislature in several sessions to try out the fair tax in Georgia. But we got to have the debate, and if we're not, we've got to try not to be partisan about it. We've got to have the debate about it because we're in great financial. I know we're in great financial shape right now. This is the time to have this kind of debate and make this decision, not when we're like in the middle of a crash or a pandemic.
Bobby, a lot of folks say that this will make us more competitive with the other states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida. Do you buy that?
Well, look, there is an argument to be made in Florida and Texas for why they don't have the state income. You just hit on it. It's a higher sales tax, which is regressive and hits poor people more than anybody. It's a higher property tax situation as well. And I have to say, if you're going to do something like that here, you have to look at beyond Florida and Texas, and you have to look at a place like Kansas that reduced taxes significantly in the state level about 8 to 10 years ago when Governor Sam Brownback was there, and it was an utter disaster. Bankrupted the state, killed the education system there, and they're still reeling from it a decade on. So I think Georgia's in a great position right now. It's always interesting to look at all the different codes and how we can change and be with the times, but I think you got to be extremely careful.
Well,
Phil?
the unintended consequences, and just one really quick thing to finish up, but the unintended consequences, there's a lot of tax credits that are built onto this tax code that we have now. What would happen to those? Sorry,
Well,
Phil.
you just stole my my talking point.
Your
thunder.
Anyhow, no, I think the right and the left can unite on getting rid of these sweetheart tax breaks that Senator John Albers actually, did that last year. He introduced a bill on that, and I think that you can get Democrats and Republicans, and that's why you should
lower
have.
the rate.
Well, you end the state income tax.
Right.
I mean, the Republican Party is for lowering taxes, and the Democrats are for raising taxes. So I think it's a
not
great
true.
issue. Oh, you ever heard of
Melita?
Joe Biden?
I
You
have
ever-
heard of Joe
You ever heard
Biden.
of trillions and infrastructure
But did he
recklessness?
pass a tax?
Okay, you two, let me let
No, he
Melita
did not.
weigh in here.
What I'd like to see Democrats and Republicans agree upon is fully funding education. The level of funding for education in this state has never recovered from the 2008 recession, despite large budget surpluses. So let's fully fund education before we start lowering taxes or changing the entire tax structure.
Including pre-K, by the way.
Including
We can do
pre-K.
that
We
at
can
the
do
state
both.
level.
We can do both.
All right.
Well, let's do one before the other.
Well, let's switch gears then, because I want to move on to Dekalb County. This week, Dekalb County Commissioner Ted Terry introduced an ordinance that mandates the safe and secure storage of firearms. We've seen plenty of cases recently where kids got a hold of guns and had tragic outcomes. Phil, I want to ask you, is this a place where there's room for compromise here?
I think so. And you know, we always have to say on the gang, we've got to read the legislation before we can really do some great commentary on it. So to be continued on that one.
Melita, you know, other metro area leaders are very interested in this legislation.
Yes, that press conference was very well attended, and you have a lot of new members on the Atlanta City Council, and actually safe storage of firearms goes into the whole Republican idea of personal responsibility, and it's kind of a no-brainer. So I'm hoping that we see these proposals across all of the metro area to make all of our children safer.
Bobby, I want to ask you, because so much of the crime that we heard about in Buckhead was people stealing guns out of cars and glove boxes and all of that. I mean, this is kind of a timely topic.
Well, you know, having been in local news for years like you, we have done so many of these tragic stories about children specifically who access a firearm by accident. They're 5 or 6 years old or 3 years old and they don't understand what the item is. And as a parent of young kids now, it's one of the big things that terrifies you when you have a kid go over for a play date. Now that we've kind of moved hopefully beyond the coronavirus stuff, you know, it's like, oh, now we're back into this again, and you got to think twice. I think anything that helps safe storage of firearms in Georgia is a no-brainer.
Well, I mean, and honestly, responsible gun owners, this is a strong issue for them. I mean, we have guns in our home. When my children were little, we had them safely stored. We have them safely stored now. People that are responsible gun owners safely store their guns.
We do too. We have safes all around the house. So, well, no surprise, opponents of Georgia's new political maps are set to file suit as soon as Governor Kemp signs them into law. Melita, I want to go back to you. These opponents say the maps are racially discriminatory. Do they have a case?
They do have a case in several places. First, Senator Michelle Au was drawn into a far more Republican district. She's the only Chinese American serving in the General Assembly. In Gwinnett County, 2 women, one black, one white, were put into the same House district when on either side of them were 2 open Democratic seats. There was no need to put those 2 women in the same district. And then, of course, with the congressional races, by changing the makeup of Lucy McBath's district, there's a possible case. And it's interesting to me that Brian Kemp is waiting so long to sign the legislation and submit the maps, because it just gives all the groups planning to file lawsuits more time to sharpen the arguments in their lawsuits.
Go ahead, Phil.
I think he should wait, because we don't have to go to the Justice Department hat in hand for pre-clearance anymore, and you just want to sue tomorrow, and why should we play into your hands? But the point is, the U.S. Supreme Court has said you can have partisan redistricting in every 50 state. The Democrat legislatures are doing this. They're doing maps to try to help themselves. You still have to base it on population. The race card, that's shameful to be playing that. Look, you know, what we're doing is we're getting Republican precincts and you're getting Democrat precincts, and you're shifting. No way a political party is going to do that. It's not racial. You know, sorry about Lucy McBath, but you can move neighborhoods in and out, and it's not racial.
All right, I got to leave it there, folks. I'm getting the hard rap in my ear. Thank you. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Martha, we're going to start with you today.
I want to thank Kim Hartsock for hosting Theron Johnson and I at the Gwinnett Leadership. We had a great discussion about politics from all sides. It was a lot of fun at Manuel's Tavern. And then Victor Lamar Johnson is organizing the Community Veterans Outreach. It's a great organization. But my loser this week is going to be Stacey Abrams. She has got to stop misrepresenting COVID. We are the 8th largest state in the country, and we have the 8th largest number of cases. We're right where we would expect to be, and she needs to be true about the numbers.
Okay, Melita.
Well, I have a quartet of journalism winners, beginning with Martha for snagging the first interview with candidate David Perdue. John Rooch at the Supporter Report examined some of the claims Bill White has been making. Emma Hurt of WABE, but now Axios Atlanta, took an unvarnished look at the Perdue gubernatorial bid re-election claims. And then Charlie Hazlett from the Troubling God's Country blog has some staggering statistics everyone should read. And my big loser of the week is Bill White from the Buckhead City Movement. Maya Angelou tells us when somebody tells you what they are, believe them, and he is showing that he is quite the huckster, and he's showing us why he was run out of the New York in disgrace.
All right, Phil, over to you.
Well, I liked your journalism winners. You forgot to mention Insider Advantage in the first poll of the election season. I wanted to get in a winner, Lee Elder. He passed away a couple weeks ago. He was the first African American to win the Masters tournament over in Augusta, Georgia, and just a great guy. And yes, Andre Dickens was a winner. I have to acknowledge that he's the new mayor of Atlanta. But as I said earlier in the show, I think that Felicia Moore was a winner too, for her fighting for honesty and transparency. And I do think the people of Atlanta are going to be losers, though, if we don't hear something in the next 100 days from the new mayor. Yeah, we'll give him a chance, Lori, to see what he's going to do about rising crime.
All right, Bobby, over to you.
I'm glad to hear you're going to give him a chance now that he's been elected for all of about 10 minutes. Okay, quick winners. Martin, who came up to me in the Kroger up in my grocery area, who's a full-time watcher of this show, loves the show, and all the folks who have been so kind as to come up and say over the past several months to see they watch this show and they love this group and Theron and everybody. So thanks again for that. And then secondly, my winner, I hate to go against you, is Stacey Abrams. This is a disaster for the Republican Party and great for her.
All right, we will leave it there, everybody. Thank you. Great to see you all in person, and we will see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.